Hi everyone, welcome to the presentation of our paper at the 20th International Technology Education and Development Conference. Hospital Ecosystem, a storytelling card game.
So if you think about the most foundational stories humanity tells, the ancient myths, the folklore, they usually share a very, very similar structure.
Right, the foundational narrative.
Exactly.
Sure.
Joseph Campbell and Vladimir Propp, they sort of formalize this as the hero's journey. And it's comforting, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
The hero departs, they face some kind of initiation, and they return with moral clarity.
Yeah.
It's a defined resolution. It's been our master tool for learning values.
And that model is so powerful because it's linear. That structure A leads to B, leads to a clear conclusion, has for a long time mirrored how we approach traditional teaching.
You mean traditional pedagogy?
Yeah, exactly. We guide the student through a set of challenges, all leading toward a single, correct, defined objective.
But the reality of professional life today, I mean, especially when you're dealing with huge institutional challenges, the system you're navigating is it's not a linear hero's journey.
Not at all.
It's what complexity theorists call a wicked problem.
Mm-hmm.
These are problems where the solution to one thing, say reducing energy costs, immediately creates new issues somewhere else.
Like inpatient comfort or staff retention.
Exactly. The modern professional world is all about interdependence, rapid shifts, ambiguous outcomes.
And that old narrative structure, the one that promises clarity, it just isn't equipped to train people for those systemic challenges. Which brings us to this huge shift.
Driven by digital media.
The rise of what Janet Murray calls replay multiform stories.
And that is the core concept for our deep dive today. We're moving from the single, heroic protagonist who finds the one true answer to a narrative that emphasizes multiplicity, contingency, and collective action.
A huge shift.
So our mission is to unpack how this new narrative structure, which models complexity, not simplicity, is being applied in a physical, tangible way. Specifically through a collaborative card game called Hospital Ecosystem.
And this is a really fascinating application because if 21st century learning really requires people to think systemically, to navigate these ambiguous trade-offs,
Which it does.
then replay multiform stories they're the perfect models for cultivating those skills. They teach you that context changes everything. You have to build the map yourself, often by compromising with other people.
Okay, so let's really nail down the difference.
Oh.
The traditional model, the hero's journey, it guides the audience toward a clear, non-negotiable resolution.
Right. And this replay multiform narrative just throws that neat structure into a complex web. I mean, the defining characteristic is that it offers a whole network of interrelated choices, branching paths.
And real consequences.
And crucially, the outcome, the story you actually end up with, it varies dramatically with each replay.
So it completely challenges the idea that there is one single authoritative storyline or moral truth just, lurking out there waiting to be found.
Absolutely. It invites the audience to move from being passive consumers to active participants. You have to collaboratively construct meaning through debate and action.
So you're not just consuming a story.
No, you are co-authoring the history of that system, whether it's a fictional hospital or, a multinational corporation.
That collaborative co-authorship part is, I think, vital. It shifts this whole discussion out of pure media theory and puts it right into established learning science. It sounds a lot like Gordon Pask's conversation theory.
Connects perfectly. Pask's theory basically says that learning happens through these iterative exchanges dialogue between learners, between a learner and the system.
And between different ways of seeing reality.
Exactly. So when you have a story that is constantly evolving based on collaborative input, that dynamic participatory process fosters a much deeper, more authentic passion for learning.
So meaning emerges through the negotiation.
Right, through negotiating different viewpoints, not just through someone transmitting facts to you.
It's interesting that the fun part of this learning model is actually forcing the compromises and the debate. I mean, if the hero's journey is a single lecture with a defined ending,
then the replay multiform story is like a constantly evolving brainstorming session where the right answer depends entirely on the path you took to get there. Which brings us to the practical application of all this. The Hospital Ecosystem card game.
Okay.
This is the physical, collaborative storytelling space built on those multiform principles, and it's all designed to teach systemic trade-offs.
So what are the stakes in the game? What is the system actually trying to optimize?
The game's core goal is to get players to navigate really complex trade-offs among 4 fundamental dimensions, and these things ripple through the entire institution.
So what are they?
Okay, so you have environmental, social, economic, and health-related or clinical. You can't make a decision to optimize your budget, the economic dimension, without it impacting staff welfare, which is social, or maybe even infection rates, which is clinical.
And the system they're modeling, it sounds pretty comprehensive. The game is structured around 4 segments, 20 unique scenarios.
Yes, covering the operational life of an institution.
So walk us through those segments.
Okay, segment 1 is foundational, energy and infrastructure. So that's decisions like, should we invest in solar installation or do we set a global temperature control policy?
Right.
Segment 2 is waste and materials, and this involves some really high-stakes decisions, balancing sustainability with safety, things like reducing single-use plastics or monitoring pharmaceutical waste.
And you can see the inherent conflict right there.
Yeah.
Reducing single-use plastics saves money, helps the environment, sure. But it could introduce massive social friction for the staff and maybe even a clinical risk if cleaning protocols fail.
Precisely. That conflict is the lesson. Segment 3 is patient care scenarios dealing with things like telemedicine expansion or creating green healing spaces. And finally, segment 4 is staff and community. This addresses internal dynamics like tackling burnout or dealing with recruiting shortages. All 4 are completely interwoven.
Okay, so let's get into the mechanics. How do the players actually interact with this system and, co-author the story?
So there are 5 players. Each one gets one of 5 unique role cards. You've got an administrator, a doctor, an engineer, a nurse, and a patient advocate.
And I'm guessing they each have their own priorities.
Exactly. Each role has inherent capacities, but also really rigid constraints and biases, reflecting real institutional positions. The narrative is then driven by 20 scenario cards, and each one offers 2 alternative choices, A or B.
There's an element of randomness, right? To stop players from just gaming the system or falling into predictable patterns.
Yes, that's the element of contingency. The administrator draws the scenario card, but then they use a 6-sided die for the first choice of a round. So let's say A for sides 1 to 3, B for 4 to 6.
So that dice roll forces the group to start the narrative from a place that might be a little uncomfortable. It introduces some necessary friction.
It prevents pre-planning. So you have 5 players, 5 choices. What happens is a sequence of 5 choices with one choice suggested sequentially by each person, each institutional actor.
Okay, and they have to justify their choice.
They do. The decisions they make and the reasons they give have to explicitly address how that choice impacts at least one of the 4 key dimensions. And that dialogue, plus the decisions, weaves together to form the backbone of a completely unique, emerging storyline every single time you play. And it's that sequential, compromising nature that makes the case studies so powerful. The source material details 2 contrasting cases, Case 01 and Case 02. The sequence of cards they drew was identical.
The same card?
The exact same cards. But the player choices, A versus B, led to wildly different hospital narratives.
Let's start with Case 01. The source calls this the Greenridge Path. The choices here seem to really emphasize patient and staff comfort and visible community-facing changes.
Yeah, look at the human element in these choices. The doctor, for example, chose to redesign waste bins for clarity. It sounds small, but it resolves a tiny, persistent friction point for the staff.
Okay.
And the engineer, focused on comfort, chose to allow adjustable temperature settings. That finally resolves that famous tug of war between sweating nurses and shivering patients.
I love that detail. It shows that systemic impact can start with solving a really trivial daily frustration. The patient advocate in this path, they chose to transform an old concrete area into a visible outdoor healing garden.
And the resulting story, from the perspective of the staff and patients, was one of emotional connection. The hospital felt, and I'm quoting here, subtly but unmistakably changed. Staff pride went up, and the community saw that new garden as a tangible symbol of hope.
Okay, now let's contrast that with Case 02, the North Star Path. This story consistently prioritized caution, regulation, standardization, a very different systemic priority.
The mindset here was safety first, often at the expense of immediate comfort. The administrator, for instance, chose to test a reusable container initiative in only one department first.
So slow and steady.
Right, prioritizing safety protocols over immediate economic or environmental savings. The engineer, focused on consistency and infection control, chose to standardize temperatures, completely removing the adjustable settings.
And where the Green Ridge Path had that big outdoor garden.
The North Star patient advocate allocated indoor space for a healing garden. Their reasoning: consistent access regardless of the weather. The focus shifted from maximizing visible community pride to maximizing clinical control.
A completely different philosophy.
Completely. And so the resulting narrative, framed from the engineering staff's point of view, emphasizes pride in being the quiet guardian of safety-stabilizing clinical temperatures, implementing stricter waste tracking software. Same cards, same challenge, but two fundamentally different hospitals emerge based entirely on the priorities of the players.
So the essential takeaway here really goes beyond the game itself. It's about the shifting of agency. This model positions the learner not as a recipient of facts, but as a narrative agent, a co-author.
And this act of collectively writing the story, where they're constantly debating the merits of A versus B consistency versus comfort, cost versus environmental impact, that is how they cultivate genuine systemic thinking.
They're seeing the consequences ripple across that network of dimensions in real time.
Right. It forces learners to think in terms of networks rather than hierarchies. You can't just follow the chain of command. You have to understand the interdependencies between, say, the recruiting office and the waste management facility.
It's all connected.
This is where we can loop back to Gordon Pask's more advanced concepts. Pask described learning domains as entailment meshes, which are basically networks of topics where people create their own learning paths. By navigating this mesh of choices in the game, their strategy becomes explicit. We can actually see their learning style in action.
Can you give us a concrete example? How does their role in the game reveal those learning styles? The holist versus the serialist.
Certainly. A serialist player, typically, might focus exclusively on their own role's key metric. The serialist administrator might only ever choose B if it promises the highest economic return, and they'll ignore the social or environmental ripple effects.
They move step by step.
Methodically, step by step. Conversely, a holist learner, they embrace the whole network. They are constantly trying to balance all four dimensions: environmental, social, economic, clinical in their decisions, even if it means making a choice that isn't optimal for their specific role.
And the game needs both.
The game needs both styles to produce a believable system. That deeper layer transforms the exercise from just decision-making into self-reflection on one's own approach to complexity.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And this whole experience is inherently ethical. It forces learners to, quote, hold tension between competing truths. CASO 1 wasn't inherently better than CASO 2. They were just two viable paths towards sustainability in different contexts.
So it teaches you to value diversity of thought.
And to embrace uncertainty not as a flaw in the system, but as a space of possibility. The ultimate lesson is that knowledge, just like a story, is contingent. It's plural.
We started with a heroic figure finding moral clarity, and we've ended with a collaborative group finding a negotiated contextual meaning. Replay multiform storytelling really does reimagine learning. It's a shared collaborative narrative act.
And it creates intellectually and emotionally invested learners. They have to be. They're directly responsible for the story's outcome.
And here's the final fascinating thought on this. The source material notes that a game like Hospital Ecosystem can be modeled for very specific contexts, differentiated by functionality, size, even ownership. The story changes based on the context you feed into it.
That contingency, the idea that the right solution is always context dependent, that is the key insight for managing 21st century complexity.
Which leaves us with this question for you, for the learner listening today. If knowledge, like story, is contingent and plural, what complex system in your professional life beyond the hospital would you like to model and explore through multiple narrative possibilities? What two alternative choices in your domain, when played out sequentially by different roles, would reveal the most surprising interwoven consequences across your own professional ecosystem?
That's where the systemic journey truly begins.
You are invited to read our paper for more details.